So basically, they want to fund films where it's about, like, let's say in Lebanese context, like a Lebanese person that's struggling to live by European values in an oppressive society. That they would fund immediately. And I tell you this, like with the See Ahead, I had these kind of comments because we didn't get a lot of European funding. Like the main French and Belgian funds we didn't get.
Yeah.
And those were the comments. That the film wasn't Lebanese enough. That the parents weren't conservative enough. That maybe there was a terrorist attack in France and that's why she came back. Because she fled that here and followed her there. And then that's why she came back. Because, we only have terrorist attacks.
Like these types of notes?
Yep. Not notes. They would tell you, like, you'd go to a jury in front of like 5 white people. And they would tell you, your film is not Lebanese enough because it doesn't have this, this, and that. And you're like, in French, which is difficult.
Welcome to another episode of Kawalis. My name is Mikey Mhenna. Today on the series, I'm very happy to introduce Ely Dagher, the filmmaker behind Waves 98 and The Sea Ahead. Ely, welcome to afikra.
Thank you for having me, Mikey.
It's nice to have you in the studio. We met in person not too long ago, but I've been familiar with your work for a really long time. And in preparation for the interview, I went to go back and watch Waves, and it was like 2015.
Yeah.
I could not believe how long it's been since that came out, which means that it's been even longer since you started working on it. Do you remember the guy who made Waves?
The guy who made Waves. For a second, I was actually thinking,
You're like,
what guy? Yeah, exactly.
It's me, Mike. But it was a long time ago.
I do. No, but I do.
Okay. Yeah.
I do, because like the process was very personal in a lot of ways, also working on Waves. Because I started writing, I think, in 2012. And I had left Beirut in I had left for studies like in 2008, 9. I came back in 2010. And then I had to leave for like different reasons, like personal reasons. And I kind of found myself not being here, although I wanted to be here.
Yeah.
I moved to Belgium at the time. And I don't know, I think being away for the first time for so long without like a purpose, like studying or so, I had graduated my MA and everything. I was a bit confused about what Beirut meant to me. And at the same time, it was when the war in Syria had started. So actually I was going back and forth, and I had difficulties, like, how do you say this? Like going back into this lifestyle that we tend to have here, which I completely understand, not judging, but where you have to sort of dissociate a bit from the reality around you to be able to survive.
Yeah.
But when I wasn't here, I was following the news all the time. And I would come to Beirut, and you had like checkpoints everywhere, and I knew that just like right next door, they were bombing, people were being killed. So I had trouble connecting with my friends here and with the city myself. And I think Waves came from that experience. So I wanted to try to understand my perspective on the city and where I stand regarding this bubble that we tend to live in. So like the elephant in the film is basically the bubble. That was the first image I had in my mind. Like I just left Beirut and I was sitting in a cafe and I just saw this like this giant golden elephant that sort of didn't belong in the city, but that somehow is just there.
Yeah.
At once like magical, but also threatening. And I wanted to understand where I stand vis-a-vis this bubble. So actually, through the process of making the film, I kind of got an answer, or more like, the question wasn't so. It wasn't just ringing in my ear the whole time. Because I felt like I needed to have an answer about that. And like after a year and a half of working on the film, somehow that question just dissipated.
Does it come back? Does that question like reemerge, and you have to or maybe it's not a question, but does that pain reemerge, and that you have to continue to kill the pain, sort of mend the wound? Like, is it a final solution?
No.
No, yeah.
No, obviously not. I mean, so much has happened anyway since 2015. And I think life here has gotten even more difficult since then. So I don't know. Like at the time, I felt like I had sort of overcome something, like at least on a personal level, because I felt really stuck. But yeah, it's a constant like searching for meaning and strength and like what are we doing.
Yeah. I have this question about fame. Okay, so I'm going to use you as a guinea pig. And that the idea that as you become more famous and as you get notoriety, the number of people who misunderstand you increases. And that's the only thing that increases, the number of people who misunderstand you, because just like the number of people who look at you increases, and there's only so many people who have proximity to you. And so just by nature of the like physics of life, more and more people misunderstand you.
Yeah.
And when you have a project that is as successful as Waves was, both in critical circles, but also just like in the milieu of Lebanon, do you feel like you were walking around with more people understanding what you were going through, or more people misunderstanding what you were going through?
So you mean 2015?
صح.
I think it was kind of both. Because, so, I mean, the thing about Waves is that, so I didn't study film or cinema. And I had, like, before Waves was selected for Cannes, I had never been to a film festival. And I produced it myself. So,
Nice. There's a wisdom in that. There's like a lesson there for people.
Yeah, it was a big lesson for me as well. Like, because I was just thrown into this world that I knew nothing about. And so, yeah, it was a big learning curve. Because already at the time, which is something that I also experienced with the Sea Ahead, for some reason, let's say from the local press, before I won the Palme d'Or, I was kind of attacked for showing like a negative side of Beirut, which I didn't really understand, because for me, like, this is just the reality that we live in. And also there was this thing of like, oh, who's this guy who just like shows up at this festival in the official selection and ends up winning?
How dare he?
Yeah, and there was a bit of that, and I was just really confused because like I really just knew nobody of like this the cinema industry, the scene, but at the same time, I think it was really beautiful, like the reaction I got from so many people who could identify with the film and found themselves in the film, because it always starts from like a personal place, but also like, I don't want to make biographical films, so it's important for me also that the film speaks to other people, and that other people can also connect with the themes of the film, and that was really good. So I don't know, I don't really pay attention a lot to the negative stuff.
Yeah. What was your training in? I mean, if you said you didn't study film. So how would you describe whatever training you think you got?
I think I got.
Yeah.
So basically, initially, I wanted to study biology, but that didn't happen. And I used to draw from very early age.
Yeah.
So literally last minute, I think 5 days before the university year started, the first year, I went to Alba and I was like, oh, do you still take me? I just want to do something creative and not go like into med school, because I liked the whole like research aspect of biology, but not so much being a doctor. I didn't care about being a doctor. So I went into uni not knowing exactly what I wanted. I went to Alba, and the first 2 years are common between all different departments, and then you specialize in the third year. So because I drew, I did an BA in illustration, which was really nice, but then I was like, okay, sure, I like drawing, but this isn't what am I going to do with this? Where's it going? So then I did another BA in animation for like 1 year. It was like just equivalence. And I did a short film called Beirut. That was in 2007, which somehow is not like, I wouldn't say it's similar to Waves, but it also deals with the city and like certain feelings within the city of Beirut. And then I took a year off, and I went to London to Goldsmith to do a master's, which was kind of a multidisciplinary course, and I figured it's where I would learn which medium I wanted to work with. Mm-hmm. But instead, I think what I learned there was more sort of critical thinking and what are the themes that I wanted to work on, more so than with what medium.
Yeah.
So like I did my MA, which was like practical and theoretical on the Holiday Inn. I know that Mayssa spoke about it
of course.
last time.
Very useful.
Yeah.
MA.
But it was in a different, like, my thesis was on the correlation of history, memory, and the archive, and the construction of identity. Because it's something that I always was conflicted with here, and I thought it was important. So I did, like, lots of research on the Civil War, pre-Civil War Lebanon, all those things. And I ended up doing like a semi-fictitious installation, like audiovisual installation, on the Battle of the Holiday Inn. But for me, it was more to question the, how do you say, sort of confront the permeability of memory, like when the physical object disappears. Because back then, in 2009, they wanted to destroy the Holiday Inn. I think every few years they come up with a story. And I thought it was like important to preserve it because once that piece of like the monument disappears, then what you're left with is the stories. And stories are very loose and fluid.
Sort of, manipulable.
Yeah. Wait, what was the question? Filmmaking. So throughout this process, throughout those years though, like I did learn filmmaking skills by myself by just shooting things for friends, shooting music videos, where I would like, you know, be DP, editor, cameraman, director, and all those things. Sometimes even like I would cut the wigs for the like the actresses or whatever. And that's basically how I learned sort of the skills I needed for film. And I thought when I did Waves, like one of the reasons why I did it also was that I knew how to draw. I knew nobody from the industry, and I thought, you know, if I can get this short film done, mostly by myself, because I could do like all the technical skills needed, I could maybe start getting back into this, not back, but get into this like film world.
Can I ask you, when you open, like literally when you created something called Waves, like the first draft, what form did it take? Was it a Word document, a Google Doc? Was it a series of drawings? Was it like a bullet point list? Was it like written on a napkin? What was the first version of something that, if I asked you to see the first draft or the first version, inception of it, what would you open up? What would you show me?
I don't have the first documents, but I have the first sketch actually, which was exactly, it's like, I still have it on a notebook at home. It's just like a landscape of a city, like drawing like buildings. And then there's an elephant protruding out of it. Like that was literally the starting point, the starting image. But when I wrote it though, I was not living in Beirut, I was living in Belgium at the time. And I knew that I couldn't afford to just like stop working and making a living to pay rent and stuff to make my film. So I decided to apply for a grant, and I got the afikra grant at the time. And that was actually really the starting point. So I guess I had to write whatever documents they needed, but I had just like certain ideas, and I had a feeling more than anything that I wanted to portray. But I didn't even know that it was going to be animated initially.
What did you think it was going to be?
I just didn't.
You didn't know?
No.
Like for you may have been drawing sort of like the storyboard.
Well, no, it's literally like this image, and then just a feeling and a sort of a will to explore this relationship with this bubble and with Beirut, but nothing else. Because, and the reason why I ended up doing animation is because I thought if it were to be in live action, then the elephant would be CGI and it would be like this sci-fi film, which is not what I wanted. So I felt that with animation also it could be more abstract in a way. Like that's why the characters in the film are all wearing more or less the same clothes, very like without many characteristics, like sort of just t-shirt and jeans, because I wanted them to be like everyone, like as much as possible. And I felt that with animation I could sort of abstract that more than with live action.
One of the things that struck me most when I first watched Waves was how muted it was, like literally visually, like aesthetically, which feels so different than so many of the animations and cartoons that I think of when I think of Lebanon and the Arab world. Like I think of I think of like Grandizer and like Captain Majid and like very bright colors. And when I think about Lebanon in general, I think about stimulation, like constant stimulation. Was that like a natural choice that you made immediately, or was it like a sort of a Control Z undo? Well, actually, this is something I want to do differently.
Well, I think it's two things. I mean, for Way specifically, one of the reasons is that I don't have necessarily like a big animation background. Like I didn't grow up wanting to do animation and loving animation. So my reference points were never other animated films. So I think coming from that background, it doesn't necessarily look like other animation films at the time. And I think like with both Waves and the Sea Heads, both are set in winter, actually. I had never really thought about it. And both are quite muted. And I think, like, part of the work that I did sort of especially focus on Beirut and the city is that, for me, a lot of filmmaking has to do with an emotional aspect versus like a cerebral aspect.
Yeah.
And I wanted to portray Beirut the way it feels more than the way it looks. I think in both cases. And I've always had this relationship with wintertime Beirut. It feels cozier and more like real than summertime Beirut. Because I feel like in summer, there's all these expats and you go to the beach and blah, blah, blah. And it's like fun. But then once winter sets in and everybody leaves, that's where like reality kicks in.
Yeah.
And there's something also about rain and like Beirut being wet that I feel reveals so much texture and like this sort of the grit that it has versus, you know, the colorful sunny Beirut.
Yeah.
So I think the choice comes from just feeling that portrays more what Beirut feels like inside versus what it looks like on the outside.
Yeah. Can I ask you a really like simple question?
Sure.
Do you like Beirut?
Yeah. I mean, immediately I'm gonna say yeah, but it's a complicated relationship.
It's complicated.
Yeah,
I feel like
course.
watching your films. I think that there could be people who come to the conclusion that you don't like it.
Really?
Yeah. And I wonder if there's like a line of truth to that, like a sliver of truth.
No.
No. Okay.
No. I mean, I think otherwise I wouldn't be making films about Beirut if I didn't like Beirut.
Yeah. I mean, but people make films about war and they make films about things that they don't necessarily like as well.
Sure, but I mean, for me, the whole purpose of me making films and like finding the energy and the motivation to work on something for so long is because deep down, even though it's difficult sometimes to hold on to that thought, but there's a thought that you can actually fix and change things.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, a lot of the motivation comes from that. So versus like instead of living in denial about the problems that we have, we might as well talk about them and face them head on.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I don't think.
Okay, I want to watch the trailer. I wanted to watch this earlier, but I forgot. So let's watch the trailer, and then I want to continue talking about this, and then talk about the next film. I'll just put this here. Can I ask you how long it took you to come up with the name?
A very long time.
Yeah. What were the other options?
Oh, I can't remember. I don't know. I tend to be way too analytical, and I question things a million times before I take decisions. Like I'm envious of the artists who just like, you know, just throw out something and they're like, you know, super
Throw
proud
paint
of
on the canvas.
Yeah, no, I can't. Like, so I had like lists of names for month and month and month. At the end, yeah, that's what I went with.
Yeah.
But I can't remember the other ones.
When you watch it now, like this trailer that we just watched, does it trigger any like specific memories of those months of like toiling over it? What does it trigger when you watch a trailer now? I don't know the last time you watched the trailer. Like maybe like
It's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah. What's like the initial memory?
Well, I think it's not so much a memory, but more like seeing where I am now versus where I was then, and what I was trying to say then and what I'm trying to say now.
Yeah.
And feeling that somehow things were clearer back then than they are now.
Yeah, like a little more things inside you, or things inside like the world?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. Like, I'm not sure if it was just because I was younger or things were much simpler at that time, but yeah, that's the thing that strikes me the most.
Yeah. Okay. I want to watch a trailer for The Sea Ahead, and then we will talk about this one.
شو قالت لك شيء؟
رجعت فاتت نامت. شكلها تركت باريس.
بعد ما خبرتيني. شو رجعك؟
تعي شوفي بعد في شوية سي في هونيك.
ما انزل مبينة ما بتنعد هاي.
طيب مثل ما بدك.
كانت العالم تقتل بعضها لتجي لهون. هلا ولدوا مرة. الله عليمك لمين بعدهم عم بعمروا.
جنت اشباح انا حوالي كتير.
ما فيك يمروا وقت هالقد بدون ما تحكينا. شغلتي لها بالها كثير لأمك.
بعرفة إنه فيك تحكيني وتخبريني كل شيء.
شو بك تفهمي؟ انا حوالي قد حكيت انك كرهتني لما فليت.
مين قال لك ما كرهتك؟
ولا تسيسي.
أنا بعرفك. قلتي لك شو عاملة؟ تعي نروح سوا.
Okay, amazing.
Tell me.
When did you start working on this? Like, was it directly after the success of Waves or after the completion of Waves?
It was neither. It was, I mean, technically it was after both of them, but it wasn't related to either.
Sure.
The trigger, the trigger point was actually, so in Waves, I don't know if you remember, but there's news footage in the beginning of the film, and then he's saying that the character, like the few dialogues that are in the film, he's saying that he's tired of like seeing the same نفس العجقة والغبرة كل يوم كل شيء كأنه كل شيء عم بيت حاله. It's like everything is stuck in a loop. And the footage I had chosen back in 2013 was from 1998 about a trash crisis in Beirut, the kind of, And the film came out in May 2015, and then in summer 2015 we had the trash crisis here.
Yeah.
And it felt like weirdly, we're actually back stuck in the same loop again.
Yeah.
Which on a personal level was a bit confusing because I had just randomly chosen that clip.
Yeah.
Randomly, but also because I wanted something that actually felt less political, but something that would touch like the whole population, because I didn't want to like be taking sides and all those things, because I feel like there's so many common issues that we need to deal with before we get into those. And that's actually what triggered writing The Sea Ahead, because by the end of summer I had a lot of friends that had started moving out of Beirut again, friends who had like settled here, who had kids, had jobs, sort of, not people who went to uni. And I myself had left before. My brother had as well, and so many people from my family had went to the US in the 90s. And like, unfortunately, in my family's experience, it wasn't all that good. And a lot of people had to come back having lost everything. So I don't know, I thought it was important to talk about this, the issue of migration, but from the point of view of somebody who returns. Once I was confronted with everybody like leaving again. And that was the starting point of The Sea Ahead.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, like, even when I look through my own family history, I have this dichotomy in my family, or a false dichotomy in my family. I have like my mom's family that all left Lebanon and Syria and moved to the States, like her grandparents. And then I have my dad's family that is here. And I used to think that it was this very clear dichotomy. But now, as I've gone to know my family history, I realize that it isn't. Like, parts of my dad's family went and then came back. And parts of my mom's family went and came back. And it's interesting, this like, the illusion of a one-way street, the illusion of this binary, you leave and that charts a completely different course forever and ever and ever, which isn't true. Obviously, it's not true.
Yeah, but also like the idea that somehow if you just leave, then your problems will magically go away, and then you're gonna have this perfect life in the U.S. or in Europe. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's not always the case for a lot of people.
Yeah. Is it the case for you? Do you feel that?
Well, I came back.
So I want to ask you about that. Do you feel like in today's world there is like a capital C, capital B came back?
No, but I think in today's world, it's also important to remember, like at least I feel that it's important for me to remember and to know that I come from a place and I have a connection to this place specifically.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I were living elsewhere, I don't know what I would be doing with myself. Like the reason why I make films and I do what I do here is because I feel compelled to actually, strive to make connections with people, to collaborate with other artists, to make a change, even though I know that, that if you make a film, it's not going to change anything, but at least you're trying to contribute to something. So I feel like, I could never really leave. I tried that. It didn't work.
It's funny because the first film we're talking about is about the bubble, the elephant, right? So it's like the second half of that sentence that you just said, which I don't know if you agree with, but I'm filling in the blank, is I could never really leave, but I'm never really here. It's both seem to be true. Like one, I can't leave. And no, what am I supposed to do? But two, there's this like elephant.
Yeah.
So I'm simultaneously never fully here and can never be somewhere else.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm not fully here, but I'm not fully engaged, let's say, in what a lot of people perceive as life in Beirut.
Yeah.
Because I think like a lot of the problem like that I have with this bubble, besides the fact that I understand that some people need to live in that bubble, I also think that it's been used against us politically. I think like this whole strategy of erasure, like that happened after the war, is systematic. So for me, it almost feels like a form of resistance to actually not want to go back into that. So it feels weird to me today, for example, in Beirut, to be living completely normal and happy and carefree when nothing has been resolved. And you don't have to look at the Civil War, just look at the 2020 port explosion.
Yeah.
So I have trouble today just like living as if nothing happened, because that's what they always want you to do, to just forget and move on and live as though nothing happened. So for me, it just feels like it's a form of resistance as well to actually not play that game.
Yeah.
But it's not very easy also.
So the people watching this who haven't watched the film, I think it's available on Netflix right now.
Yeah.
So is it available globally? Do you know, or is it just
on
available?
Netflix?
Yeah.
No, it's only in MENA.
Okay,
The
so
MENA
like
region.
trigger your VPN, Zool.
Yeah.
Watch it. But give us a sort of a broad brush, like the Netflix blurb. Like what do you think the film is about?
Oof, so many things. There's so many layers. So on paper, it's about a young woman who had moved to Paris to study and returns home to Beirut. But in reality, like on a personal level, for me, it's also about accepting failure. It's about love. It's about community. Sort of reconnecting with the people here. It's about Beirut. And I don't know, it's about finding ways, I guess, like this reconnection to try to make sense of life here. Like try to make sense of a life where you feel like you don't have control over your destiny, over your future. Which is what I found the most difficult being in Beirut, because any second something can happen and then you have to like start again from scratch.
Yeah.
So that fear is constant, and like finding solace and finding ways to overcome that fear by sort of reconnecting with people. Because you asked me before, like if I love Beirut, like for me Beirut is made up of its people, not so much of like streets and buildings. Like I don't care so much about the urban landscape as much as about the people here.
Yeah. So you started talking about when you started working on it, but was there a sort of a trigger, like the raw seed that sort of birthed this broader story?
In what sense?
Like, where did the idea come from?
Well, like it literally came just from that feeling of like, oh, everybody's leaving, but like I don't know what I feel about leaving because it's not all so great.
Yeah.
And I guess also a big part of it was very personal because it has to do with my brother's journey also, who had left to the US and had a difficult experience. So like this sort of reconnecting that I mentioned, I guess also it's something that I felt we needed also as a family because it was something that we never properly talked about, his return. And at that time I was not like fully returned yet. So I guess it also had to do with my fears of coming back or not and what that actually meant for me. So I think that was like the really initial seed.
Yeah. Where did the characters come from?
Where
Like the meat on the bone for these different characters. Like, do you have reference points? You're like, okay, this is totally my brother. This is totally this. This is totally this.
No, I try to, like, for me, the characters exist only in the film. Like, I actually don't even write backstories.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care about what the characters did before the film. Yeah.
Interesting.
I never do.
Wow.
Yeah, they start with the film and they end with the film. Like, this is where the character lives.
Wow. So cool.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like it's a waste of time. Like, I have an idea, obviously, of who that character is.
Sure.
So when I'm writing, like, everything informs that. Like, there is, like, I know who that person is. But I don't need to know like where they went to school and what they did, what's their favorite color and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, like luckily actually, because Manal Isa plays the lead role.
Yeah.
Luckily, when I met her, we had so much stuff in common, and she had so much stuff in common with the film, and with the script. So at some point, it just made sense that we'd be working together. But I didn't write the film for her. It just happened that we were kind of on the same page in terms of what we wanted to do and wanted to explore.
Can you tell us like some of the basics about how it was shot, where it was shot, time period and all that stuff?
Yeah. So basically, we were starting to prep the film in autumn 2019.
Nice. Great timing.
Great timing. Which was very confusing because I did have like a crisis at that moment, because when the revolution started, like so many other people felt that, you know, we actually are gonna change the world and the country and everything's gonna be great. So I was like, okay, why am I making a film about, you know, somebody coming back and this fear of the catastrophe looming over us when that's gonna disappear? But then like as it got closer, things had started to fall apart. And I knew that, well, I was probably just wishful thinking to a certain degree, even though a lot of great things did come out of it. But I felt like, okay, we're gonna actually go back in the same cycle. So I thought, okay, let's stick to the plan. There's only one thing that I changed actually during the shoot, which is just the last shot of the film, but I'm not gonna say what it is. But that was the only thing that I changed as we moved forward. So I ended up shooting in January and February 2020, and we finished shooting 1 week before COVID.
Wow. There's like a 2-month period.
Yeah.
That's possible.
That was the period we had.
Jeez.
But then, like, because of that, also, like, the whole post got super delayed. Yeah. Because we're supposed to start editing in March, but then that didn't happen.
Yeah.
We started editing remotely because I was co-editing with the French editor. We started in June, I think, once we knew that, okay, COVID's gonna be a while. And we're doing that remotely. And then I was like mid-editing at home when the port exploded.
Yeah.
And then, I only finished the post-production in like February 2021.
Do you feel like to understand this film, you really need to understand Beirut, and you need to understand, you know, the last 100 years or 50 years of what it's like living here? No, I mean, I'm saying no immediately because, I mean, this is something that I think about a lot and I try to work around. It's because, like, I'm not interested in making a film or making films that are educational in any way.
So for me, since I'm like the film is set in Beirut and my characters are Lebanese, my main audience is local, and they don't need any explanation. And if any foreign audience is going to watch the film, I want them to be able to relate the film to their own experiences. Because I feel like that's also a big problem with the industry from the region, is that because we also depend a lot on European funding, there's always this expectation of like us exaggerating our otherness and our like all the stereotypical things that make us supposedly. So I never want to dive like into the explaining or justifying anything.
It's so funny, like what you're talking about, the reliance on European funding is such a, for me, is such an existential problem for the film industry.
It is.
Because you see films that are just like ChatGPT generated regurgitations of the themes that these funds care about.
Yeah.
And it's absurd. It's completely absurd. Where does that actually come from? Like, at what point is it like on grant websites and they see the themes? Like how do filmmakers find out that this is what matters?
They tell you.
They tell you.
They tell you. I mean, it's a complicated thing. Like, and I have maybe like an extreme point of view on this because it really.
I have an extreme.
It really pisses me off. No, but the thing is that like I see European film funds as like an extension of post-colonial kind of,
Preach.
It's just like humanitarian aid basically. And then they use that against you because like, oh look, I mean they oppress their queers and their women, and they just want these justifications actually, and all in the guise of wanting to help the oppressed.
The civilized,
of course. So basically they want to fund films where it's about like, let's say in Lebanese context, like a Lebanese person that's struggling to live by European values in an oppressive society. That they would fund immediately. And I tell you this, like with the Sea Ahead, I had these kind of comments because we didn't get a lot of European funding. Like the main French and Belgian funds we didn't get. And those were the comments. That the film wasn't Lebanese enough. That the parents weren't conservative enough. That maybe there was a terrorist attack in France and that's why she came back. Because she fled that here and followed her there, and then that's why she came back. Because, we only have terrorist attacks.
Like these types of notes?
Yep. Not notes. They would tell you, like you'd go to a jury in front of like 5 white people, and they would tell you, your film is not Lebanese enough because it doesn't have this, this, and that. And you're like, in French, which is difficult.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So just like, so on the nose.
Yeah, like I never heard a comment that had to do with like, the artistic quality of the film.
Yeah.
Like it's not about cinema for us. It's just about talking points and like causes.
Yeah. So you're a very smart person. What is your prescription for getting out of this loop that we're in? And it's not just the film industry. It's every industry. I mean, the film industry has the benefit of being literal, like it can, because it uses words and uses images. So like we don't see that as much in music. We don't see that as much in sort of painting and stuff like that. But film is like the most and media and like what we do.
Yeah, of course.
Like both these things, these worlds are, I think we're victims of that game. Yeah. Some people play the game and no judgment, but you gotta hate don't hate the player, hate the game.
Hate the game, yeah.
But what is your prescription for changing the game?
I don't know. Honestly, I really don't know, because I've like ever since this year I've been struggling with this, because what I was writing since then all had to do with this.
Yeah.
And it all came from like an emotional reaction, I guess, to this, and wanting to expose this or fight this or whatever. Like this whole like Western gaze on us and what we're supposed to do and say, with them wanting to help. But then since October 7, I don't know, I have like an existential crisis on like what the whole point is to begin with of making films. Honestly. So that's where I'm at, and I feel like.
Where are you at on that issue specifically, the existential crisis?
I'm still deep with it.
What is the nature of the crisis?
Well, because like I know that most independent films, very few people end up watching them. Like we don't have that much of a local audience, and we end up showing the films abroad to European and American audiences. And I don't know, I have no interest in talking to them at the moment. I'm just really pissed off, unless I'm saying things as they are. So I think we need to re-question not just the funding, but also like how we talk to audiences, and who do we talk to. I think it's a big issue that is not dealt with, and I think also we have to find different ways, or try to find different ways to make films that do not rely on these foreign funds.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, I don't know, this is today, I might change my mind soon, but like today I only feel like there's two ways of making films. Like I'm either gonna make a film that is gonna address all these issues and go like head on, which is gonna be like a huge battle, or you can make films that are basically just strengthening the local film industry, film scene, and culture. So basically, it's a form of resistance also by strengthening what you already have.
So, yeah.
But in no way, I think we should keep playing the game. And I thought that most people would be thinking like that, but actually they're not. Because I think the machine is back on track now. Which was quite surprising.
Well, I think you can do both at the same time. Option 1 and option 2, which is what I hope you find the strength to do. It's exhausting for sure.
Yeah.
What's interesting, the one thing though I want to clarify, at least in the way I think, and maybe you think the same way, which is I don't think of this like dichotomy of like local versus foreign at all. And afikra is very much an expression of that philosophy.
Of course.
Which is I think of a term I like to use that has not caught on, but I'll use it again, which is this idea of the local diaspora, right? And the sort of the global local, right? So like, and your films are a really good example of that, not only insofar as who you're speaking to, but also the characters of them, right? Like the local person who is in Belgium or in Paris or in New York or in Cairo or in Dubai, or like all these different places that are abroad, and their bodies are there, but their personal biographies aren't.
Yeah.
Like the personal biographies are like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I think for that audience, it is important to screen globally and to take that public fund, because they tend to be paying taxes in those places.
No, of course.
You know.
I mean, for me, that was the I don't know how to say this without using a word that sounds like positive, because it wasn't joyful, but I guess the moving things for me, like when I screened the film abroad, especially that it came like in 2021, like within the year after the explosion, was that I met a lot of Lebanese who had just left, and the film deals with this fear of like, the catastrophe. And I don't know, so I had like really, really good connections and meeting with people all over the world through the film on these topics. So it felt like there's something sometimes that I feel as well when I watch films, like cathartic, when you feel like your experience is being portrayed on screen and you feel like I'm not alone in this. And for me, that was like the most powerful thing about the film. So, and I do agree. I mean, it was also obviously very different screening it here, also super powerful. But what I didn't expect was the Lebanese abroad and the amount of people that had just left in 2021.
Yeah. I'm curious how it plays, if you know, how it plays in different parts of the Arab world. Like how it plays in Khalij, in Hira, in Sudanese communities, in North African communities, in Wen Makan and Syrian communities. If you've heard any feedback, because there is this idea of, the whole region, for worse, has diasporic communities. Have you heard people relate, or have you heard stories of people relate from other communities? Reach out to you, say, oh my God, this is like copy paste. This is exactly what we go through.
Yeah, I mean, mostly I got a lot of DMs about that, especially in that period, and a lot from Egypt, actually. That was like the most messages I got about the film was from Egypt.
Interesting.
And I did feel that strongly also when we screened in Dubai at Cinema Aqil.
Yeah.
because all the diaspora was there. I don't know if you know the cinema.
Of course, yeah. Buthaina is a friend. Yeah,
Yeah. I think they do great work.
they do. Shout
And
out to Buthaina.
yeah, and the film screened there for a whole month actually, which was great because besides that, like in other countries, it was just a couple of screenings in festivals and stuff. I think in Egypt it also screened for a month at Zawiya, but besides that, it's just festivals. And Cinema A'il, like that was where like within one screening you had like the Lebanese, the Palestinians, the Iraqis, the Syrians, like all these Arab diaspora sort of combined in one room.
Yeah.
And that was super moving because that also had, it was the first screening I had in the Arab world actually. It was in Dubai after Europe.
Yeah.
And it was really refreshing because like it felt like, okay, finally I'm within my people, sort of, the ones who the film is talking about.
Yeah. Can I ask you, where do you get your like inspo from? You're specifically from like the film world. As somebody who like 2 minutes into this interview said, I was not trained as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Like where do you like pull stuff and get inspiration for ideas, for techniques, for ways for a story to unravel itself, ways to shoot things, ways to direct? Where do you get some references?
I'm trying to think. Like, I don't think there's direct references. But I mean, obviously, I am influenced by like some filmmakers from a very early age. And
so let's get the top 5.
the top 5.
Yeah, top 5 filmmakers who influence Ely Dagher.
I don't know if there are 5. Maybe they're less.
Okay. Why?
Well, I mean, I have to start with the first one. Like since I was like early teens, it was Jim Jarmusch.
Yeah. Cigarettes and coffee.
Yeah. Well, it was Night on Earth actually.
Okay. Cool.
I saw it when I was really young, and I was like, I don't know, the fact that it wasn't like a normal narrative film kind of struck me and stayed with me for a while. I was like, oh, okay, actually you can do other things in cinema than just like tell a story. So yeah, actually it's always been directors who kind of play around the mold of like classic narrative. It was Jim Jarmusch, David Lynch, and Michael Haneke. I think these are like the 3 that most influenced me.
Amazing.
I think Caché Hidden by Michael Haneke was a huge influence as well when I was younger. I would add Chris Marker as well.
Okay, so David Lynch, what film, and Chris Marker, what film as well?
Chris Marker, La Jetée, obviously. David Lynch, I think it was Mulholland Drive.
Yeah, one of those films you have to watch like 10 times to be like...
It took me 3 times to finish it. It took me 3 times to finish it, actually. I would always fall asleep. But yeah, like I had seen Twin Peaks earlier, but I didn't make much of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw it again later, but then it was Mulholland Drive that kind of threw me back. But then I've seen all of them.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're part of the scene now?
Here?
Yeah.
I guess.
I love asking this question to people because I've probably asked this question to like maybe 10 or 20 people, and the answer is always, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And it's like, who's in the scene? No one thinks they're in the film scene or the art scene or any scene. Everyone's like, I don't think so. It's like, who's in it if no one thinks they're in it?
Well, I think because it feels like the scene is so small, and a lot of like filmmaking in Lebanon has to do with sort of individual aspirations to make film. Like people just make films.
Yeah.
And we don't really have an industry. So I think there's no infrastructure, like proper infrastructure. So I think that's why it also feels like there is not so much of a scene to begin with.
Yeah.
That you can be part of. But I mean, I'm definitely more part of the scene than I was in 2015.
Yeah. I want to talk about the project with Mayssa Jallad. If you haven't watched the episode, you should watch it. You're animating all these amazing visuals to go along with this really heartbreaking album about the Civil War and specifically about the hotel wars, basically. Holiday Inn, Burj Al Moor. So talk to me about how that type of collaboration emerges, and also how did you create these stunning, like almost breathtaking visuals?
I met Mayssa in 2019 actually, during the revolution, but it wasn't at a protest. We were prepping for a protest, like, so I saw her, she was on the floor like writing banners and stuff. I was like, oh, I like that. So I don't know, so we connected immediately actually on that level. I felt like really good energy from her, and we just stayed in touch for a few years. And then she just contacted me to tell me about the project, and it was just super random. Like, she didn't know that I had worked on the same themes before.
She had no idea that you wrote a master's on the same.
No, she had no idea.
How funny.
And actually, because initially we worked also on a music video for Medina Min Baid. I don't know if you've seen that one.
No.
So it was also a song that, you know, had to do with Beirut. And I ended up making a music video where she was also impersonating the city as like the seductive belly dancer, but that falls apart as you're like watching her. So already, like, I don't know, it made sense because I've always loved music and I've always loved to work with music, because I feel like, because like for me, filmmaking also is very emotional in a way, and I feel like music and images work so well together to convey that, like, certain feelings. And so I don't know, it just made sense to work with Mayssa. And when she found out that I was working also on the Holiday Inn, she was like completely
Yeah.
but I don't know, like, I got super excited about it because I felt like I finally met somebody that's, I don't know, there was so much things in common, and it felt like we could actually help bring the best in each other when it comes to this collaboration. So it just, I don't know, it was just meant to be,
Super
I guess.
cool. What are you working on now? What are some of the other projects that you're working on now? Do you take multiple projects at the same time? Do you like juggling, or are you sort of a single track type of person?
Well, when it comes to, you know, my personal films.
Sure.
Yeah. So right now I'm writing, and for the first time without a clear perspective on where it's going. Because I feel like I need to give myself that grace, because with everything going on, it's a bit difficult to foresee the next few years. And like, what you want to say today might not be valid in a couple of years.
Yeah.
And there's something like you always have to mind when you make films, I guess, or 4 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm writing something that I had started pre October 7 that I had stopped completely, and I'm just revisiting to see if there's something that I could do to make it make sense with what's happening today.
Yeah. True or false? Is it about Beirut, and does the sea have anything to do with it?
The sea doesn't, actually. For the moment, no. There's no sea in it.
Yeah. Did you know that you had this very intense connection to water as a Beiruti until you started just like outputting art related to that featured it so heavily?
No, but it followed me, actually.
Yeah, it
throughout.
follows for sure.
Yeah, because even like the project I did at uni, my BA film, Beirut, also had to do with water, basically, as like this post-apocalyptic, just 5-minute short film, world where the sea has run completely dry.
Yeah.
And there's no water in the city. And that was also like not intentional. But I think because I grew up on the coast, like we grew up in Amar Chalhoub, like next to Zalqa, where the mall is. In between banana fields was like a tiny old house, like a farmhouse.
Yeah.
So I always knew that the sea was like a few hundred meters away, but we didn't have access to it. Like even my first project, like my photography project at uni, was these photos when they were actually doing the landfill in Dubai, the marina.
Yeah, of course.
So that was my first photography project. So I was always kind of interested in this like closeness to the sea, but also lack of access to it. You know, like there's part of the urban violence that we live through in Beirut that's sort of very, like it's very, a bit extreme when it comes to the sea, like with all the landfills and like our relationship with the sea is quite complicated.
Yeah, it's funny, just like the idea, the way you describe where you're from, where you grew up, is a heartbreaking thing. It's so heartbreaking because you're like, I'm in Zalqa, surrounded by banana trees. That's not the first thing you said, though. You said, by the mall.
Yeah, well, now, yeah.
Well, as in, like, there is this, like, beautiful natural, what should be a beautiful natural reference should be like, oh, I'm by the banana trees, by the coast, right? That should be enough to tell me where you are. But it's like, no, I will tell you this, like, hellscape of a ugly urban.
Well, because we lost the house in 2004. And they cut roads between the banana fields, so it's not existing anymore.
Oh, so it's literally where the Bahia Marina is right now?
No.
Okay.
That's
Why
where...
does that part of do the banana fields still exist? Let me ask you that.
Most of them not, because basically there was this planning from the 60s. They wanted to build a second highway parallel to the highway, sort of more on the inside. They went like from the Nahr al-Maut all the way to Antelias.
Okay.
So they actually banned building like on that strip. So you had like a huge strip that kind of was forgotten until like early 2000s. It was just like all orange fields, banana fields, and like old farmhouses just by the highway.
Because it was supposed to have turned into a highway.
Yeah, but actually they removed the takhtit a few years ago, so now people are allowed to build again. So now it's kind of disappearing slowly.
Well, people can find the film on Netflix with your VPNs. And Waves 98, I don't think is available legally online. You can find it if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, the Sea Head as well, by the way. You can find it as a... I mean, that was really like high point for me when I found it as a torrent.
Yeah, you can find both of them online. But yeah, that must feel good. That must feel
It does. It does.
Yeah, it must feel great. You know you've made it. When you're on the torrent, you know you've made it.
Yeah, or when you're like on this weird Facebook group that sends the film on Telegram, like a really low res version of the film.
Mama.
And the guy tells you, you're one of the top downloaded films this month. I was like, great.
Mama, I made it. Ely, this was super, super fun. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Go check out the film. This is great. So great to have you.
Thank you, Mikey.